Hello again. In the previous video, we stopped with a statement that the model that we tried to create doesn't represent the reality very well. And so it means we need to look for the other way of introduction of money in the utility function. The problem with the previous model was that it showed the super strong neutrality of money, which means that at the end, the results of the model said that consumption and labor decision doesn't depend on the quantity of money in the country, which we know is not true. The problem with the previous model was that we mainly concentrated on the store value function of money. So as we introduced it only in a budget function, meaning that or showing that we can transfer money from one period to the other. And so in that way, we increase if we do save some money in the first period, in the second period, we have more possibilities for expenditure. Though, at the very beginning, we said that the major function of money is a medium of exchange. So the idea of implementation of money was to ease in the exchange of goods and services. And probably we need to concentrate on this function of money, thinking of building a model that would represent the reality much better. So now we are going to change the utility function, thinking how we can introduce the money as the intermediary for exchange. And we are going to concentrate only on one period, as we are not going to be concerned about the store value function. First of all, we can do some axioms. So we can remember some axioms of preferences. Two of them are logical ones, and the third one is related with the topic, that is with the money. So the first axiom says that if the individual prefers a bundle of goods A to another bundle B, then he will always choose A over B, which is very logical. The second axiom says that if the individual prefers A to B and B to the third bundle of goods C, then he prefers A to C, which is again some logical conclusion. The third one, the third axiom is about the peculiarities of money. In the case of financial goods that are not used directly in consumption or production, but are held for exchange for other goods in the present or the future, the individuals are concerned with the former's exchange value into commodities. Which means that when we store money, or when we have money, in order to do the payments, we are also concerned about the value of money, because that means, or that shows how much we can buy with the same amount of money. Okay, so now we need to make some adjustments about the role of money for the utility function. So when we think, why do we keep cash instead of having any other financial asset? What would be the answer? From the first sight, we could say that cash or money in our pockets makes payments quicker and easier. Having money and not any other financial asset saves our money saves our time on making payments. So that's mainly why we all prefer to have money instead bonds, let's say. So we could say that utility of a person depends on consumption and leisure. Remember, comparing with the previous consumption function, instead of leisure, we put labor time, work time. Here we put leisure as work time and leisure are two opposites. So leisure increases the utility, as well as consumption increases utility. We can say that leisure, entire time spent for leisure, is entire time we have, H0, minus n, which is time we spend for work, and minus nt, which is time we spend for making transactions. So leisure, the time which increases our utility, depends on entire time we have, the time we spend for work, and also the time we spend for making payments. So time we spend for transactions depends or is a function of money we have for transactions and consumption. The more we consume, the more transactions we need to make, and so the more time we need to spend on that. The more money we have, the less time we need to spend for making transactions, as we can do this way quicker. So what does it mean? Or what does it say at the end? It says that we can include, in this way, we can include the quantity of money into utility function a bit indirectly, as we have leisure in utility function originally, but leisure depends on time for transactions, and time for transactions depends on the quantity of money we have. So the more money we have, the higher is the utility. As the more money we have, the less time we need for making transactions. So we have more time spent that we could spend on leisure. And so bigger leisure leads to higher utility. Okay, so we have utility function. We also need to think about some restrictions or constraints. And from this perspective, we need to think about the cost of money, about what does it cost to hold money. Though normally we can say that it doesn't cost anything. We just put them in our pockets or in our wallets, and we don't need to pay anyone anything. Though from economic perspective, we should think about opportunity costs, about what do we sacrifice in order to have cash. And so if we keep cash, it means we do not invest them or buy any financial asset. So we could say that the cost of money is the interest foregone because of holding them. So the interest that we could earn if we buy any bonds. So here is it is written in formulas. Those two are very, very similar. The first one just represents nominal cost, and the second one represents real cost, so excluding the effect of prices. So what does it say in both ways? It says that the cost of holding money is the difference between interests on bonds and interests on money. As typically, we don't earn any interests in having money, so the entire cost is interest on bonds. In some cases, I remember that okay, many years ago, the bank used to pay you interest on the money you have in debit card. So if it happens like that, so that cost of holding money decreases a bit because you still earn something on holding money. And though normally nowadays this doesn't happen that often, and we can say that interest rates on bonds represents the cost of holding money. So this is the individual perspective, or this is the consumer's perspective. Why do people need money? But it's not only people, there's also firms which also needs cash or needs money. And we can say that for a company, for a firm, money is like a production factor. So the more money they have, the higher the production can be. So we could put money as a production factor into production function of a company. I just want quickly to remind that this is a typical production function, which says that the quantity the company produces is a function or depends on amount of labor, amount of capital, and in this case we add amount of money. Why do we think about money as a production factor? Again, we are going to take the same approach or the same function of money, that it helps to make the transactions, which means the more money the company has, the quicker it can make all the payments, and so it helps it to achieve higher production. We can say that actually the money is not that direct component of production function, as it should help again to save some time. So the logic is like that in general the production amount depends on the quantity of capital and quantity of labor. Labor and one which is time spent for producing. While time spent for producing is the entire time worked in company minus N2, which is time spent for making payments. And N2, time for making payments, depends on production amount, which means sales, and it also depends on the quantity of money the company has. The more money the company has, the easier it is to make the payments, and so time for that needed for that would be lower, which means the time which is spent on producing could be higher, and so the amount that company produces could also be higher. While if company has a lack of money, then it really takes time for it to find, to take loans, to borrow, to make some decisions what to do now, and it needs way more time for finding money for making all the payments, which means that N2 is gonna be higher, and then the time which is spent for producing would be lower, which would reduce the production in a company. So again, we have the same perspective or the same logics when we talk about companies approach, the same one that we had with the consumer approach. Having cash saves money because it makes it easier to make the transactions. So when we talk about company perspective, it's not the utility that it aims to maximize, but it is its profits. So we can write the firm's profit function, which is, as you know, profit is income minus costs. So income of company depends on its the amount it produced and prices of its production. And then costs are of different production factors. So it's labor cost, amount of hours worked multiplied by wages, then it's capital cost, cost of unit of capital times amount of capital. which is cost of holding money again, amount of money and cost of holding money, and then which is fixed cost that the companies acquire. So we can also should have some budget or restriction functions, which is about the cost of money and cost of capital. So we already said the cost of money is the alternative earnings, so what the company could earn if it invested all the money into financial assets. Which mainly depends on the interest on financial assets and interest on money. And cost of capital is again the interest, the depreciation of the capital, and the change of price of the capital. So if at the moment depreciation of capital is something that doesn't concern us a lot, so we can make it equal to 0 and simplify a bit the function of the cost of capital, which would had only two variables. So putting them all together, we could have a nice long profit function. And again, we could solve the exercise for maximization of profit. In the textbook, you can find way more about calculation or finding the general equilibrium, but at the moment we are not going to concentrate on that. The results is something that interests us way more. And so if we derive the demand for money function from the utility function and profit function, and if we put the money supply and solve for the equilibrium, what findings our model would give to us. And the findings are like that. It says that increase in money supply and prices will not have any real effects on the economy as long as these increases do not change the real value of initial endowments and do not introduce expectations of inflation. Initial endowments can be in the form of commodities, money, or other financial assets like bonds. And real balance effect is the effect of changes in real money stock on the aggregate demand for commodities and other goods. The first finding is the most important. It says that increase in money supply and prices has no effects on economy if the real value of endowments, initial endowments, doesn't change and people do not start to expect higher inflation. We can question this a lot. In general, this first statement says that money are neutral, so that the changes of the quantity of money, when money is only a nominal value in the economy, so the changes of the quantity of money does not change real values, like the amount of goods we can buy, the amount of production, and etc. And it happens because of all prices increases at the same proportion. The real value of initial endowments does not change. Interest rate is paid on all money balances. And the expected inflation rate equals the actual rate. So there are no errors in inflationary expectations. Are these assumptions realistic? Probably not. If you look at each of those four, I believe you can say no, it's not. Does all the price increase at the same proportion? Normally not. Does the value of initial endowments doesn't change? Probably not. If we have inflation, normally it is changing. Does money pay interest? Usually not. Does the expected inflation equals the actual rate? Again, normally not. So what does it say? It says that probably the money are not so neutral, or we need to find another model for general equilibrium in money market.